Hello, and thank you for joining Growing Tech Fast, the condensed Org3D podcast where we talk about growing tech startups with those who have grown them. So today I am joined by John, CEO of Vero Technologies. It's great to have you on the podcast today. How are you doing, John?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. Well, I'm really excited to hear all about Vero Technologies, but for the benefit of our listeners, John, can you tell me a little bit about who you are and what the mission is with the work you're doing?
Absolutely. So I've spent my career in financial services, but the last 5 years have moved over to the fintech space from the banking world. Recognizing that there are so many different use cases in fintech these days, I've really zeroed in and spent my career on the B2B side of things. Here at Vero, we've built out a commercial lending platform specifically focused on providing inventory financing to dealerships of manufactured goods. So, this isn't all commonly known, but when you drive by those auto dealerships in town, they don't typically own the vehicles on their lot. Those vehicles are financed by a third party. And banks don't typically play in this space, given the operational intensity of the credit product. So the space is dominated by specialty finance companies, and we're coming in to really digitize and provide a different, unique borrower experience for the dealerships that we're working with.
Amazing. And how did Vero Technologies come about? What kick-started this journey?
Yeah, with my last role, we were working with another auto finance business. I very much got in the weeds in the space and how things operate. And I saw, a massive market opportunity that, frankly, and a lot of competitors in the space who were running very solid businesses, but had never really contemplated what an innovative model, utilizing open banking tools, digitizing workflows, providing any type of kind of modern borrower experience would look like. So the further we got into the weeds, we saw a real gap in the market where many of these dealerships, specifically outside of urban areas, were doing banking with the local community or community bank or credit union. However, these smaller financial institutions weren't able to support a broader set of their commercial banking needs, i.e. inventory financing. So we've built our platform out to actually be the bridge between the community banks that dealers are working with today and ultimately provide dealers a lower cost of funds and a better borrower experience relative to what they're accustomed to with the specialty finance players who have come to dominate the space historically.
Great, okay, amazing. And now on to, I suppose, the journey of Vero Technologies and also your journey. Are there any particular moments that triggered a change in your approach to startup life?
Yeah, I think it's one of those transitions that you kind of dip your toe in, and the further you get in, the more exciting it becomes. Obviously, leaving the institutional banking world was a big choice, but it ultimately was the conclusion of several years of feeling a little bit like a cog in a wheel. No matter what position you get into, you realize that these large financial institutions are set up so that they will exist forever in a lot of ways. And no matter what you bring to the table, it becomes somewhat of a commoditized space to operate in. Selfishly, I'll disclaim my own point of view. Nonetheless, I initially worked as an entrepreneur in residence for a software development business, which allowed me to kind of start spinning up new businesses, albeit in a safe space. And having done that for about 4 years, it became inevitable where you realize you want to take ownership of your work. You feel like you're qualified to make the decisions that need to be made and going off on your own and founding a business. And at a certain point, it becomes impossible to ignore. So it was about 1.5 years ago where I was fortunate to partner up with my co-founder, Isaac, and we've really just hit the ground running since.
Wow. Okay. And have you overcome failure throughout your career? And have you got any good anecdotes you can tell our listeners?
I think we overcome little failures every day here. It's really an attitude shift. So yeah, there's been some career moves where it's been, a question mark as to whether or not I made the right decision. Ultimately, you find the silver lining in any role that you're in, and ideally take and learn from it what you will, and then figure out how you reorient in your next one. But I think ultimately there's been disappointments, but not necessarily failures. I've looked at it as, certain dead ends or things that you would expect to work out that did not work out, that provided a often painful lesson to be learned. And then you move on and you figure out how to optimize from there.
For sure, just continuously learning. I love that. Okay. And it's January 2022 now, so on to a new year, but could you tell us maybe some of your favorite moments of 2021?
Yeah, I think we started 2021 as a team of two. It was Isaac and myself. We had just closed our pre-seed round. And through the course of the last year, we've built a team of 10 full-time and another 10 contract employees. We're in the process of closing our seed round now. So obviously getting the term sheet for the $4 million round that we're raising was very exciting. And getting that across the finish line is obviously a bit of a complicated process, but comes with the territory. But getting and hitting that $1 million loan origination number and hitting the $5 million number and approaching the $10 million number as we are now have all been very exciting moments to kind of take a step back and realize that we're on to something, we're moving quickly, we're being efficient, and we seem to be on the right track.
Yeah, amazing. Okay. And onto, I guess, your personal development. You were saying with disappointments in this industry that you definitely learn and move on. But have you seen any changes in your personal development and your personality, I guess, since starting the company?
Yeah, I think that was one of the quickest lessons I had to learn, was that really when you go off on your own, there's no one else to make the hard choices. Especially when things don't go the way you expect them to. So if you're working with a vendor and the deliverable doesn't come through to the level of quality you're looking for, or you're working with a client and the client, takes advantage of the relationship or is creating too much of an operational burden, you ultimately have to be the pardon my language, but the dick, and make the hard choice, go toe to toe, and ultimately have a very difficult conversation. And so I think, early on, it was not a role that came naturally, but it's something that you had to kind of dive into and deal with the discomfort around, simply because no one else is going to do it for you.
Absolutely. I love that. Okay, great. And do you have any role models? And if so, who are they and why?
That's an interesting question. I've contemplated it previously. I think there's no one that I don't really look at like the Elon Musks or Bezos or large entrepreneurs as role models necessarily, as the trailblazers that show you that it can be done and that it's possible. But frankly, there's some friends and family in my life who show me what it's like to be a good person, who remind me of, the realities of being a human and the fact that we're going to make mistakes and no one's perfect. And I think if there's anyone who's plays a critical role from a role model perspective in my life, it's those people who bring me back down to earth, because sometimes you got to check your ego when you're trying to move as quickly as we are in this business environment.
Yeah, 100%. It's so easy to get caught up on all that stuff. So great answer. And did you set any New Year's resolutions this year, John?
Go to less weddings.
Nice.
That was I think it's just the phase of my life we're in, but by the 10th wedding last year, I was a little bit exhausted.
Right, I see. No, I think everyone came to that conclusion last year. Okay. I also hear, John, that Vero Technologies is in the process of securing its most recent funding round. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we're raising a $4 million seed round at a $16 million pre-money valuation. And, it was a grind. I think everyone kind of warned us before we kicked off the process that it's going to be a roller coaster, and it was most definitely a unique gauntlet to navigate. So, we're fortunate that we've got a syndicate of investors who are really excited about being on board. Obviously, these earlier rounds are very important in terms of finding, institutional investors who not only provide, strong support and signal to the market from a validation perspective, but are also able to really strategically help you make the right connections and avoid missteps. So we feel great about who we got on board. It's a handful of groups who are really subject matter experts in the auto finance space, in the inventory or commercial lending space, or working with small and medium-sized banks and helping us navigate those conversations as well. So we feel very well equipped to really hit the ground running through the course of this year.
For sure. That's so exciting. Great. And obviously 22 looks like it's going to be a massive year. And I know you're on the hunt for the best candidates to grow even more. What are your hiring plans? And I guess just your plans in general as a company?
Yeah. So our goal is we're at 30 dealers today, and our goal is to get up to 250 dealers by the end of this year, along with 5 banking partnerships. So obviously there is a lot of legwork to be done in terms of getting plugged in with dealers, continuing to build out our technology platform capabilities, finding the right banking partners, and supporting, the kind of smart growth of the organization from an operations perspective. So right now we're hiring a director of operations. We just recently hired a program manager to manage our banking relationship, or kind of the outreach there on that front, but really focused on building out the core technology team and making sure that while we really have assembled a unique team of auto finance professionals, as well as product and technical and business talent with startup backgrounds, we want to continue to have a diverse mix of people at the table who are bringing great ideas around how we can solve legacy problems with very innovative and bespoke solutions.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a big but exciting year. Okay, what are the best bits of advice you've been given in your career? I find this is always an interesting one.
Yeah, I think it was a neighbor who advised me at one point when I was kind of at a crossroads deciding between the 2 different opportunities, to pick the one that was going to provide the best story. And I think in a lot of cases, people put a unnecessary amount of pressure on certain career decisions because they believe once they go down that path, there's no turning back. And that's not to say that that is the case in many career paths. I think in the entrepreneurial world, we're fortunate that the diversity of experiences that you have and bring to the table ultimately differentiates you as it relates to being successful. So I think coming up with experiences that provide you that story, that expose you to new ways of thinking and really throw you into the deep end and figure out if you can swim, are the best types of experiences that ultimately position you to be successful down the road.
For sure, that's some great advice, and one I think our listeners could definitely use. Anyone could use, really, I suppose. So great. So to wrap up the episode, since it's New Year, John, what should our listeners be doing more of in 2022?
Keep working hard. I mean, I think there's especially if you're in the hiring market, there is a multitude of opportunities. Admittedly, it's been challenging to hire because we're up against a bunch of other great hiring companies that are in the market today. And so, if you're not necessarily actively looking, but you're contemplating looking, have those informational conversations, invest in the process, because ultimately I think the more conversations you have, the better sense of what an ideal outcome looks like, and the more conviction you can have when you do find that dream job that comes across your face. So, it's a matter of putting yourself out there, making that upfront investment, but then also, not being afraid of the hard work that comes with the environment that we're living in.
Yeah. Love that. Absolutely love that. Okay. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, John. Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast and giving a little bit more insight into Vero Technologies and your journey. So thank you so much for sharing everything today.
Thanks for having me.
No problem.